1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Boom, 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 boom.
I knew that music was coming in, but I somehow still didn't expect it. Because I just went to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You remember that, right?
I do. Oh, yeah. Was that Reading Rainbow or Sesame Street?
No, that was straight up Sesame Street. Yeah, pinball animation.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Sure.
No, it was good. That was formative in your childhood.
This was brought to you by the letter 12.
Thank you, Count.
Oh, you're welcome.
Who was your favorite Sesame Street character?
Oscar the Grouch. I'm not even joking.
Oscar the Grouch. It's very fitting. It's very fitting.
Oh my gosh, I never thought about that.
Mine was Eddie.
When you hear the tone, it will be exactly time to get
Yeah.
a drink.
Yeah, you remember him from Sesame Street?
I don't remember a lot of drinking on Sesame Street. A lot of cocktails?
Well, maybe it wasn't this Eddie. He worked the grocery store. He was the...
I remember Gordon, the bald guy, and Maria.
Maybe there was.
I don't remember it.
Maybe I'm thinking of Gordon. Actually, Snuffleupagus.
No, but Gordon wasn't. He didn't work at a store. He was
Snuffleupagus actually was my favorite.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and I never got enough of him.
Yeah,
I love the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's first of all, guys.
What's the point?
Hold on. We're gonna get to it, but we're. Oh boy, we got a real mental log.
This is 0. This is a
guys. Welcome
3-0
to episode 30 of a Sinner and Saint podcast.
We've been doing this 30 times.
Bring it to you. On the 0 episodes, though, we flip the script.
Switch
Patrick
roles.
comes in with the.
So we always start with the spirit, which is the cocktail, and Ben usually brings that in.
But today,
and then we travel into Sinner and Saint conversations. And then I close with a spirit, which is usually a collection of the conversations that sends us out in some positive, affirming way into the week.
Which I hold no promises I will do at the end of this
Ben
episode.
is going to do that if he is still awake.
Upright.
Yeah. But tonight...
these are boring.
Today I'm going to bring the drink. And this drink I stole from America's favorite father, T. Hanks. Tom Hanks.
Okay.
Tom Hanks brings us in. He calls this cocaine. It is Diet Coke, 2 parts Diet Coke to 1 part champagne. And it's kind of a craze. I've not tried this, so I have no idea what it's like. Sláinte.
Wow. Okay. So that's in my mouth. Oof. It's like Coke and apple juice.
Yeah, I think you failed us there, T. Hanks. I think you steered us wrong. But,
episode over. Let's go ahead and close it down. That way I won't have to do anything. Favorite, going back, favorite. So Snuffleupagus is interesting. Do you know the history of Snuffleupagus?
No, but you were like, totally
now, guys,
shady about Snuffleupagus.
This is a little bit off color. Snuffleupagus started...
The dirt of Sesame Street.
No, it's not the dirt of Sesame Street. Snuffleupagus was actually a conjured character to get kids to talk about things that might be happening in the home that were abusive. Because if you remember when it first started, no one could see Snuffleupagus but Big Bird.
Oh, I know.
Big Bird was like Snuffleupagus was Big Bird's friend, but no one else could see Snuffleupagus. And so it was like all these things that kids were going through that they could see in their homes, but they couldn't talk about with others. So no one else could see it. So it was a perceived thing. And then they were just like, okay, there's a kid show, and this might not be the best way to, this might not be the best message. And so then Snuffleupagus could appear to everybody. And it was like, okay, good. Wow. But when that started, the history of Snuffleupagus was he was trying to help children talk about like childhood abuse or childhood like problems because it was the elephant in the room.
Sure.
That they could see, but everybody else couldn't see, and they needed to talk about it. And so that was the origin of Snuffleupagus. And then they were like, too psychological. Like,
it's too much.
On screen, like, let everybody see Snuffleupagus.
We'll let Fred Rogers deal with that.
Yeah. Let Fred Rogers deal with that. Another Tom Hanks reference. Yeah. But yeah, no, Oscar the Grouch was my favorite because I never thought about it until you just said it, and I answered honestly and immediately, but I was like, oh, I've been sour since I was a kid. Oh, no! I've been that jerk.
You needed a Snuffleupagus.
I guess I did. I don't know. I was more just like, I want to live in a trash can and be alone. Get the hell out of here.
Grover was also my second favorite, and I loved his the monster at the end of the book. That was a clever, like,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Don't turn the page. There's a monster at the end of the book.
Yeah, and then isn't he the monster?
Then it shows up. He's like,
guys, spoiler.
It's true. It's true. And it was great. It was like
statute of limitations.
We often are scared of things that are ourselves, and just
it's
kind of like a podcast I started 30 episodes ago.
I'm gonna lie down.
Let's go back to T. Hanks.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just take a break. Favorite Tom Hanks movie? He's done a few of them.
Oh, do you know yours right off the top of your head?
But there's a lot.
Do you have a favorite Tom Hanks movie?
I think so. I think my favorite is Castaway.
Is it really?
I think so.
Did you see that in the theater?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember I think my parents saw it and they were like, you got to see it.
Yeah.
And so I remember being like, that's one I want to watch. And I think probably so. I think that was early on in our marriage. And I think it was probably one of our date nights where we went and saw that. And what I like about it is, you actually see the psychological toll that trip takes him on.
Oh yeah.
To where his best friend becomes
a volleyball.
Yeah. And the reality of that, of like, no, we are created for otherness. And in the space where there is not otherness, we will fabricate that otherness.
Sure. I have to say, I have thought I think about Castaway probably once a week. I'm not joking.
Is it your favorite Tom Hanks
No,
movie?
it's not. It's not. And I asked if you saw it in the theater, and I'll get back to my point, sidebar. But I asked if you saw it in the theater because I remember seeing it in the theater. And I was so into the movie that when the plane crashed, I was emotionally overcome with fear.
Whoa.
Like when it went, because like the cinematography is so good of it going down and hitting the water. And I was like, I felt like I was in that plane and I was panicked.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have like a panic attack or I didn't cry or anything, but I was just immersed in the cinematography of it. And so I was impressed. I was highly impressed by that. There is a large part of me that wants to live that life for the rest of my life. I want to be alone on an island in solitude with no one else around. But I've like taken myself through all the paces of I'm okay when it's rain season. I'm okay when it's monsoon season. I can rebuild my shelter. I can figure out how to fish. I'm ill-equipped to do it. I would die on day 30. Like, I wouldn't last a month out there. I'd die.
I think it's that. In my head, I tell myself, I'm a survivalist.
Yeah, but
I don't think I would be.
I'm like, the BS-ery of life as it is, boy, wouldn't it be great just to get marooned on an island where you've got to live your very worst possible life? But somehow, to me, that seems like an attractive thing where I'm like, I
can take that. Give me 30 days of that, please.
I can do that. Yeah, like if my wife dies, sayonara. I'm just gonna take a raft down to the ocean.
Just go in, yeah.
But then you have to think about that movie. He escapes.
Right.
He fights all odds. He figures out how to get over the monumental wave, to get out to sea, to be able to be like captured, or not captured, but like saved.
Yeah, saved. And then goes home to a love that he thought.
Who moved on.
Was there, and she did what she had. Like, that's the hardest part of that movie of like...
But it's also the best line of that movie, where he's sitting in her kitchen.
Yeah.
And it's her house with her now husband.
Yeah.
And kid. And he's like, so let me get one thing straight. Nashville has a football team? And it's like, she's like, we almost beat the Rams in the Super Bowl last year. We got to the 1 yard line. And it's like... Because you're like, let me get one thing straight. You moved on. That's what you're expecting. He's like, we have a football team. Oh, I love that. I love that turn. Yeah.
I loved Helen Hunt in that rain shower.
Yeah. That's for the French Center of Bonjour. Man, there have been so many good times. I feel like I have one in mind, and I know that's not my favorite Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah.
So, because I'm not a rom-com fan, but I love You've Got Mail.
Oh.
And like that's one of those movies that if it's on, like I think like whoever wrote that, his lines are witty and funny and like he delivers them. But I'm not like I don't really like romantic comedies.
I've never even watched it because I can't stand Meg Ryan.
What is you're a monster.
No, she's
adorable.
That's the problem. Like
you hate adorable.
You're not. That person doesn't exist. My favorite movie of her is Addicted to Love, where it's a Matthew Broderick and her are in this movie, and they've both been scorned by love.
Okay,
and they find that their significant others who they were scorned by have hooked up, and they find an abandoned warehouse across from their apartment that they're able to spy on them. To see,
okay,
and then they decide to work together to sabotage
Matthew Broderick. So that's
he's not great, but
yeah, he's kind of the
Meg Ryan in that is kind of this. She's kind of this hardened, like whatever. Like she's not the soft adorableness. She's like no, life's like her. My favorite movie in that is she and Matthew Broderick are their characters are building this relationship. She's like, "What's love?" And he gives this. Love is this beautiful, like this flowery definition. And she's like, are you kidding me? She's like, let me tell you what love is. Love is my dad having this dog he loved, finding out that it was infected with maggots, and him picking out the magnets from his anus until they were all removed so the dog would live. That's
now
love.
that I can identify with. That's
I'm like that's the Meg Ryan I like.
That's love.
And that was not the. She's you okay? You okay there? Yeah. No,
I don't know. I'm just when you start talking about maggots, I got really emotional.
Ben's having a moment here. We'll stay tuned.
I got a lot of opinions about maggots. It's real love.
It's a great movie because it's like. Love is not this big flower. It's a rom-com, but it's not in the way of like everything works out and everything comes back together. Although it kind of does at the end, but
I'm sure it does. Stupid Meg Ryan.
But it's outside of When Harry Met Sally, there's not many movies that she's in that I'm like, oh yeah, I'd like that.
Okay, but this is Tom Hanks talk though.
This is Tom Hanks, yeah. So that's fine. You like
I'm trying to think like what he's been in so many movies.
So much. Like when he was in the where he's the pilot that crashes in I felt like him in that role. Like when I see a well-known actor or actress in a role, my thought is, do I not see you in this? Like if you can get me to see
we've talked
the
about
character and not you.
Which is why Will Smith sucks. Yeah.
But in that, I saw Tom Hanks throughout it, and so in that I was like, this is like me sitting down with Tom Hanks in a room and him telling me the story. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a movie. Like it was a fine movie and it's a fine story, obviously because it was reality. Yeah. But I was like, it was
also really. It just wasn't interesting to me.
It just was
like the story.
It just was a story.
Well, but the thing is, I didn't even care about the story when it was happening.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. You landed in the river and saved some lives. Awesome. Good for you, buddy. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sorry to anybody who might listen to this who was on that flight, but I don't care.
There's a
congratulations on living.
There's a series on I think it's Paramount Plus that's called Tulsa King. That stars Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, I liked it.
And I don't remember who the female lead is on that, who's the ATF agent.
Yeah,
but the episode where she is like, I was in New York City when Sully happened. I was in New York City when 9/11 happened, but then also, and I was great there. Like she's like, she's telling her story. She's like, I killed it as an agent during 9/11, which led me to some promotions and led to some recognition. But she said, and then the Hudson River landing happened, and she said, I thought that was that again. Mm-hmm. And there she just spiraled out of control. And I love that episode because I'm like, yeah, how real would that be of here's another plane coming down in the city.
Yeah.
Can I handle this? And she kind of breaks. Like she kind of shows like,
sure.
She stops thinking rationally about her job and acts irrationally in that.
So I'm going to pivot.
We took this sideways. Sorry,
No. I'm going to pivot this. Tom Hanks, we're done. Bye.
Yeah.
Good luck, Aston Villa.
You still give me. You have to give me his favorite before we move on.
I don't care.
Okay. All right.
I'll go with You've Got Mail. I don't know.
Big? Is it big?
No. The Burbs probably. Maybe the Burbs. That was funny.
Burbs.
That was fun. I mean, I watched it when I was a kid. I don't know. So let me ask you this. So you're talking about that agent. She spirals out of control. Do you ever allow news articles to give you panic? Like, do you ever hear something on the news and you're like, oh, that's concerning? Like, we should, perhaps as a country, we should keep our eye on that a little more closely.
I guess no.
Okay.
I can't, there's nothing that comes to mind, so I guess the answer is no.
I intentionally thought about that this week, where I was like, I'm going to ask him about that on the podcast because I wanted your honest.
Do you?
Once in a while, yes. So I keep my finger on the pulse of global politics, and as well as like the global economy. And so I'm always looking for news sources from credible countries that are outside of the U.S. because we as the U.S. have a very centric, and that's not. We only think about us. We don't think about us as part of the larger.
Yeah, you listen to The Economist. I listen to The Globalist.
Yep.
So
but recently there was a Chinese surveillance balloon spotted over Wyoming. But it was a couple 100 miles in the air, but it was large enough it was visible from the ground.
Uh-huh.
And the U.S. decided not to act on it.
Right.
But I will say, so it was funny because recently I had some very close friends who live next door to me who are traveling abroad. They were in Europe. And I'm kind of the proxy to their son, where it's like he has like family staying with him, but like, hey, if he needs something, like he can come over for a cooked meal, or we can just go hang out, or we can go play tennis or whatever if he reaches out. But there was this book. It was actually a trilogy called 1 Second After, 1 Day After, and 1 Week After.
Okay.
And it was written by a Purdue grad. No, I'm sorry. 1 Second After, 1 Week After, 1 Year After.
Okay.
But it is essentially, I wish I'd never read it because it is like global apocalyptic, where Iran and China have, spoiler alert, Iran and China have joined forces and they've detonated a nuclear bomb a couple 100 miles over the Earth's surface. So there's no nuclear fallout. It just fries all electronics. So planes don't work, cars don't work, cell phones don't work, electricity doesn't work.
Cast away, get yourself a volleyball.
But in an urban environment.
Yeah.
So now it's turf war. It's people stealing from people. It's protecting your land, your home. And so my wife and I were kind of talking about that after the Chinese balloon thing. And I'm like, you realize if that happens, the neighbor's kid's ours now.
Right.
Like we're raising him because they're trapped in Europe.
Right.
Like they can't get back home to their kids. So like we're now providing for their kids, and it's like village mentality. And so those things, like we've talked about, I'm a curious minded guy, but those kinds of things where I'm like, I know that countries spy on countries all the time, but like you've got a balloon a couple 100 miles up, but where maybe just a button crashes our electronic system. And like, even think about it from today. You and I record these podcasts next to your house. It's a half an hour drive to my house.
Yeah.
So that's half a day's walk for me to get back home.
Right.
And like, but what am I going to encounter on my walk home? Like, what kind of crazy is going to be out there?
You don't think your car's going to work?
My car's electronic. Your car's electronic.
I got a motorcycle. We'll put you on a motorcycle. It has nothing electronic on it.
Your starter?
Kickstarter.
Oh, that's right.
You're good to go, man.
Yeah, because you're
I'm getting you home.
Yeah.
You're getting home.
Yeah. Your little guy has a kickstart. That's right. Yeah, your little guy
I just saved your life. Darlene, you're welcome.
Well, you got
Darlene,
me home.
I'm sorry.
You got me
You take it how you want, Darlene.
That's right.
She doesn't listen to the podcast anyway, so she's like, not going to know.
I was kind of hoping he was gone for good. So, I got to tell you, I'm robbing Joella's on my way home.
Yeah, Kim and I have talked about that, and part of that was COVID, where a lot of prepper conversations started.
Sure.
And it seemed like in our social media, at least I was, I don't know if Cammie was, but I was getting these ads of like, buy your bulk canned items that last for 50 years, right? And you could buy, like from Walmart for $250, you could buy a 10-year supply for 4 people of a pallet of food. And I was like that's a good deal, but like,
yeah.
And so Kaylee and I had a conversation about it, and I was like, if anything ever happens in our world where that is the reality, that's not a world I care to live in. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to fight for existence in that world, because that world sounds miserable. Where people are stealing and killing and shooting and fighting for one another, like, that's just anarchy, and whoever has the biggest gun supply is going to win. Exactly. That's not going to be me.
Yeah.
And that's going to be an existence that is not something that is enticing. Like, that's not living. Right. That's not living. So, like, for me, it's like, I guess I'm checking out, unfortunately. But I'm not fighting for that existence.
Yeah.
So yeah, Tom Hanks took us down.
Tom Hanks! God darn you, Tom Hanks!
Did you see Cloud Atlas with him and Halle Berry?
I never did. I read it though. Did you read it?
I did not read it. It's probably a better book than a movie. The movie's a little trippy.
The book was a little trippy, which is why I never saw the movie. The book is the only book I've ever read that's palindromic. So it was really interesting because it was it was 8 sections, and the first section wraps up in the 8th, and the 2nd and the 7th and the 3rd and the 6th and the 4th and the 5th. Whoa. So like you go down 4 different rabbit holes, and then you go backwards through the rabbit holes to get out of the story. And it was. Did you ever read Push by Sapphire?
No. I don't read a lot of fiction.
It was.
You're a big fiction.
Well, no, that was nonfiction.
Really?
It was based on a true story.
Okay.
So, the interesting thing about that is it was written phonetically. So I remember when I started reading that book, it was essentially written in Ebonics. And I was like, these aren't words. Like, these are not. And so, like, I, for the first 10 pages, had to retrain my brain to only read the words phonetically, to be like, okay, this is what it's trying. And it was an incredibly unique book to read once, because some of the content was so gritty. But it's kind of the same thing with Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas was a really interesting book to read once because of the layout. But it's like the storyline, if you're getting me because of the way you wrote the book, not the content of the book, it's probably not a book I'm really interested in.
Right, yeah.
It's like A Clockwork Orange. If you haven't read that, like, he invented a pseudo-language. So, like, you just understand there are some words that mean something to him that don't mean anything to me. So I just skip over those words. And it's, again, really gritty content, not a great book to read.
Which is different than Lord of the Rings, which has a whole elfin and dwarf language, which some people have taken to learn, but has great content.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Great story.
Yeah. So it's a little different in that regard. Interesting. Sinner and Saint moments.
Well, I love Tom Hanks and I hate him.
Brought to you today by the letter Z.
Oh, no. That was nice. So.
I got a quote that maybe will lead us into this.
Yeah, we'll try it.
Maybe it will.
I'll try
this is from Nelson Mandela.
Okay, I've heard of him. He
says, "I'm not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying."
Okay.
What do you think of that quote? We'll take the quote and then we'll see if we can get into the sinner saint moment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it, because coming from a non-religious perspective, I don't think there is. So we talk about sinner and saint moments, things like that. For me, it's kind of best and worst. And so you look at, like, we are always our worst versions of ourselves, but if we're always aspiring to be our best versions of ourselves, that's a really positive thing, so long as we keep on trying. I think it's when you decide you're just going to live in the mediocrity of what you've become and stop striving to be better in any way. And then, like, taking that more to like a sinner and saint, if I want to continue to do saintly things like contributing to my neighborhood, my environment, my community, my state, my whatever, and like making things around me better, I think the moment we stop trying to do that is when we just decide, well, the sinner is won. We no longer need to strive to be saintly. We can just live in our mediocrity of sinfulness.
I think one. I'm going to drive your point further. So for me, I think we talk about sinner and saint, which is very a Judeo-Christian perspective, and in that, I think sometimes that gets minimalized or simplified to morality, of goodness and badness, which is a disservice to the larger understanding. Which where I think if you take the Buddhist perspective of that, if we were to cross the boundary there, the language would change from sinner and saint to freedom to fixation, where the process is don't be tethered. The Buddhist principle would be don't be tethered to anything that keeps you kind of imprisoned in that space. And so the goal would be nirvana or freedom from that, where you have no attachment to. And then if you take that to a Taoist perspective, you have the yin and the yang, which we love to talk about, which is about balance,
which people really don't understand, right?
Right, yeah, keeping a balance.
I got a tattoo in '91. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's a great design, but it's this understanding of balance where the yin and the yang operate in relationship to each other. That you can't have a life of yin. Yeah. You can't have a life of yang. Those become destructive to the extremes.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily translate easily in a correlation to sinner and saint. But it does. I'll stop there. But those are three illustrations three lenses that you can look at of this, of like, okay, when we talk about sinner and saint, like for me, those are the three perspectives. Like, what's the balance that you need of yin and yang? Where are you struggling with freedom and fixation? Mm-hmm. We talked in the last episode a little bit about control. I think control is one of those things that the toxic version of Christianity has held on to as the way of God, that they've seen God as this controlling factor of our life, right? And we hear this in cliches of like, well, everything happens for a reason. That's a controlling statement that overly simplifies and creates a toxicity in Christian theology.
Well, when God closes a door, he opens a window.
Yeah, right. For you to jump out of.
Welcome to the main door.
But this reality that I think that's where Jesus, the person, as a historical figure, I think that's what he taught, was this teaching of let go of control. Mm-hmm. Like, let that be removed from who you are as a person, right? And so when we think of marriage, relationships, we hear this teaching of like, well, the Bible teaches don't have sex before marriage. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. Show me anywhere in the Bible where it tells me not to have sex before marriage. In fact, it teaches some pretty toxic things. It says if you're raped, you should marry that person. Which, and no one who has a healthy perspective of relationships today would say, no, you should go back to that person as the victim and choose to enter into a lifelong relationship with him.
I don't know anything about that, but that seems pretty bad.
That seems pretty bad, right?
Pretty bad.
And so you dig into these things, these cliches or these overly simplified teachings that the institution has taught us, that we've kind of held to as the teaching of that religion, but is not necessarily teaching of the Bible or Scripture, mm-hmm. or also Jesus, which shows us a whole nother way of like, no, don't attempt to control. Be present, be real, be in that moment.
Yeah.
And in that presence of reality, embody the way of the kingdom that Jesus would say. The way of the kingdom is the way of grace. That in the moment that you try to control that is the moment that you try to become king or God, in which case is the moment that you fail at that existence.
So then his quote from a secular perspective, what do you take from it?
Well, I think part of his quote is missing something, and I don't have the context in which his quote was said, but I'm not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying. Well, keeps on trying at what? Because there's some people that are perfectly content at continuing to keep trying at sinning, which just continues to cause degradation and pain, and they're called everyday people.
Sure.
Right? Well, that's who I am, right? People that are like, well, that's who I am. That's just who I am. Well, that's not who you are. That's the image that you want to...
That's what you've become.
Yeah, and that's what you're okay allowing yourself to be.
Yeah.
And so I think there's, and again, I don't have the context of this, and I would say that Nelson Mandela is saying the sinner who keeps on trying to produce some sort of goodness or reconciling or healing. Obviously, his whole life and his imprisonment and his freedom was based on that. And so, when I come back to this quote, it's how are you trying to go back to the transcendentals, how are you trying to create goodness and beauty and truth in your world? And I think unfortunately, like goodness and beauty are easy, or easier ones in our culture to think about. We think we like truth, but when we look at truth objectively, like truth is a hard mirror to look into, because the moment that we look into truth, we realize that
it's uncomfortable.
Truth is and all the transcendentals operate in this way. They're both a mirror to ourselves as well as a window to the world around us. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes we like to use those simply as the window to the world around us, without necessarily looking at the mirror at which they reflect who we are.
Well, that's why there are Karens.
Yeah.
To simplify it, to distill it down to its most secular point, that's why there are Karens.
Yeah, no, that's true. We watched, speaking of Karens, we watched the new Netflix series movie called You People, which is Eddie Murphy and Jonah Hill's movie.
It's on our list. I've not seen it yet.
So
no spoilers, please.
No, we watched it recently, but it deals with some real reality of just systemically how racism works.
Sure.
Because oftentimes when we talk about, at least in white circles, when we talk about racism, we talk about morality, right? Well, I don't treat those people poorly. No, maybe not. But systemically, there's this personification that degrades or even kind of criminalizes the other. Mm-hmm. And that movie deals like it's a comedy, but it deals with some pretty harsh topics.
Sounds like it's a dramedy.
But it deals with some harsh topics on both sides of the reality, where it's like both can become toxic. Black freedom, black suppression, trying to have that conversation can become toxic when you just become a jerk about it. Yeah. While at the same time, like white ignorance continues. Jewish, yes, so particularly Jewish in that, where it can become toxic when you lack the wherewithal to see yourself within the context and the understanding of where that is.
Sure.
And part of that is like your problems are unique. Don't always try to find the comparative tether to other problems. Yeah. Because in doing so, you lose the texture of that conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of the problem with Western Christianity, because Western Christianity, when it reads Scripture, it creates Westerners who have a lot of privilege and money and influence. It says, well, no, you're the victim or the oppressed. That the Bible often is. That's the audience who the Bible is talking to. Yeah. But when we read that as Westerners, we put ourselves in the place of the oppressed, and we are far from that. If anything, we are the oppressors. We are the Egyptians. We are the Romans. We are the Babylonians. We are all the people who are bringing the heavy to the people who are actually writing the story of the Scripture. And when you forget what your place is in the story, it changes the narrative. And if you're a person of privilege, putting yourself in a place of oppression, that's just abuse. Yeah. You're just creating abuse. So, yeah, thanks Tom Hanks for that. Tom Hanks wrote the Bible.
Well, I don't know about that part.
So, the saint, we'll go back to Mandela's the sinner and saint moments. My saint moment is going to be a conversation, and this is not solely mine because it came out of my marriage, where we were having. In fact, my wife, when it happened, she's like, "I'm giving you all sorts of fodder for your podcast, aren't you? Like, I'm just going to be the source of all the saint moments of your whatever." And it was this moment of like we weren't firing all, like the gears were grinding in the relationship, and some of it was just fatigue, and some of it was the busyness of whatever. But there were external factors that were just creating some tension within.
Okay.
And what I appreciated in the saintly moment is both my wife and I saw that at the moment of like, we're arguing about this stuff, but we're not really invested in it. Like, it's not really us arguing. It just is us we're not communicating. Like, we're saying the same thing, but we're not hearing each other kind of a thing. And so we both kind of recognize that. And that's where her statement came out of like, I'm giving you all sorts of, like, I'm just giving you softball pitch after softball pitch for you to go on the podcast and be like, well, let me tell you about my wife. And some of it was...
That can't be good for you.
I'm like, that sounds like trouble.
Yeah,
but some of it was so outrageous. It was funny. Like, it was like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah.
And we did in the moment have a chance to laugh at that. So it was kind of that sinner saint again. That's where the yin and the yang comes in, because it's like, it is that balance of like, no, there is all this crazy and it is creating tension, but the yang of that was, we see that. We recognize that. We gave permission for it. And so it didn't become...
I might have missed something. What was the catalyst of this? What was the...
Nothing. We were doing some traveling. We were going we were going on some trips, and there was a few other things that were just kind of happening in our world. And so it was a lot that was kind of going on, and it had a potential to be just kind of this detonator of whatever, but for whatever reason was just few and far between. Maybe they're becoming more common.
Okay.
We had this level of awareness within us that we didn't get into that butting of heads moment, and we kind of came into this of like, what is happening? What are you doing? Like,
I'm trying to read between the lines here. So it sounds like you were having a conversation that would have been argumentative, but you were instead like laughing about the fact that you were just having openly contentious conversation without argument.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, and recognizing
your mind is like a drunk baby. It's amazing trying to follow you.
Yeah. No. Thanks for tethering that out.
Trying to figure it out as we go.
Yeah, because it could have been in a regular moment. Just could have been an argument.
Okay.
Frustration, and then us.
But instead, it was just a healthy.
It's
dialogue.
like, what are you doing? What am I doing? Like, yeah.
Is there context to this? Was there like a topic or?
No, it was we were heading out of town for the weekend. We were heading on a trip, and we're not taking. It was just she and I were going. And we were leaving the kids behind, so it was little dynamics of like,
just the two of you.
Do we everything managed for the boys while they stay at home?
Okay.
Us trying to get on the road. Okay. A little bit of timing that was coordinated and all that creates a little bit of stress.
Yeah. So what was the fodder for the podcast that she was throwing out there?
Just some simple, where she was just, it was so, to me, it was very obvious of like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. But she got stuck in her own head, right? She got stuck in her own cyclical whatever of like, this mattered, this was important. And I'm like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nope,
it's fine.
Yeah, it's going to take care of itself kind of a thing. And when she finally realized it, she's like, you're right. That's foolish.
She's like, no, you're right. No, they're going to eat.
Yeah. Well, whatever it was. Yeah. And so I appreciated the fact that she kind of had that wherewithal of like, she didn't double down. She wasn't willing to fight for that moment.
Now let me ask, you guys went away. You were overnight, right?
Overnight, yeah. 2 nights. 2 nights away.
Do your boys just stay alone?
They do, yeah. And our in-laws are close, so they have connections, and we have friends that are close, and so we kind of have them both on alert of just like, and the boys know like, hey, anything major happens, reach out to them. But
house to myself.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
No, that's cool. I got the party invite. I just didn't come. It was awkward. Like, you don't want to be the twice the age guy at a high school party. That's weird.
You know, it's bad when the cops show up.
Well, I mean, no, I can cover cops. I mean, come on. Tell them to go direct traffic. That's all they're good at.
Yeah. So I think part of that, too, is, interestingly enough, I will say, Cammie listens to the podcast.
Hi, Cammie.
Hi, Cammie. And I think she also is weird. I think she's also learning she's hearing my inner thoughts that are getting fleshed out in this conversation, which I think is also playing into the dynamic of our relationship. And
that seems like a healthy thing.
In a good, healthy way. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Did you start this podcast to save your marriage?
Oh,
is that what this is?
Yeah, we're not there yet, but
Here's my advice to a one sincere, devoted listener. Perhaps start your
own podcast.
No, not that. Start a separate email account and email us specific things you'd like to hear us talk about to perhaps save your marriage.
It's going to be interesting when you start a podcast with Cammie. And
wait, she hasn't.
And I hear the other side of this.
What do you think she goes on Wednesday nights?
That makes all sorts of sense. It's not Taco Tuesdays, is it?
Nope. No, because it's Wednesday. Yep. She and I record a podcast called "How to Save Patrick."
Oh well, boy, that's a tome of
we don't
literature.
know how. We don't know how.
No.
Is it tome?
Tome?
Oh.
What do you call it?
I never knew how to say that word.
Oh.
I always thought it was tome.
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 Well, I'm French. Tome.
Well, that explains.
You got a Center and Saint moment? A quick clip?
Regarding Tom Hanks or what?
Just, I don't know. Anything you need to get off your chest?
No. Right. I'm good. How about you?
I shared mine, so.
Oh. Well, I feel like we talked about the Nelson Mandela quote.
Yeah. You have anything in reference to there?
Not that I haven't already said.
Okay.
Which I feel like's a little cheap, but like honestly, it's nothing.
No, I think it is that trying, the sinner that keeps on trying is that trying for healing, restoration, goodness. I think it comes off the rails when it becomes toxic.
It's
or
like we were
defeatist.
saying earlier, like the complacency. If you get to a point where you're just like, no, I'm good with who I am. I'm complacent. I don't need to try any harder to improve. Yeah. Like that's where you, as your analogy earlier, that's where you flatlined.
Right.
Like that's where you stopped living.
Yeah.
And so if you're not willing to try and be better or experience the ups and the downs or just, I mean, be a better friend, be a better husband, be a better partner, be whatever it is. Like, just like, if you get to a point where you're like, well, I mastered it.
I'm done. Right.
Then first of all, write a book that no one will buy because you're a jerkwad who thinks that they know everything. And then also just go ahead and kill yourself because we don't need you in society. So.
Who did we offend? We offended Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, maybe stay on the silver screen and not behind the bar, buddy.
Wow, that drink sucked.
Not great. Not great.
I will. Anybody who thinks they're perfect, we offended them.
Yeah, if you think you got to figure it out.
Yeah. Thank goodness we're on video. I'll do it again.
I was gonna call out an entire generation, but I'm gonna
Gen Z.
Well, no.
Millennials.
Nope. I was going older.
Oh, babies. Get bent, baby boomers. They're not listening to this. They can't figure out how to work a phone. Are you guys on the radio? I want to listen to. I was at 104.5. I don't know how to get you on the radio.
Takeaways?
That drink sucked. That's my biggest takeaway.
My takeaway is I wasn't planning on doing that, but I appreciated. It was a nice reminder for me that the sin and saint, the fixation and freedom, the yin and the yang. Like
I like that you brought that in.
Yeah, I think that's a key point because sometimes when we oversimplify sinner and saint to just simple morality of like, well, I was a good person. That's a little deeper than that. It's a little deeper than that.
And I like too that you brought it. Excuse me, you brought it to other religions because you and I've talked about before that like everybody's really just chasing the same God. And like in my mind, visually, it's like all religions are going to the same train station. They're all just taking different routes to get there. Mm-hmm. And so like everybody's chasing the same God. They just call it a different God. Mm-hmm. And so like individual religions are all, and these are things we've talked about over dinner well before this podcast started. But so I thought it was really interesting, and I really appreciated like bringing it to other like the yin and the yang, the fixation and the freedom, and I love Nirvana. I mean, even after Kurt Cobain died, I loved it. So still a fan.
Yeah, I think vernacular is limiting. I think our semantics, the way you use for language, it creates a limitation naturally. Like,
well, and we're so Americanized. It's us, right? It's just no. We're right because we're Americans, and we're not the greatest country in the world. We just think we are. So,
so we just offended the entire.
Yeah, if you're a stupid American who thinks that you're better than everybody else, get bent because you suck.
USA, USA. Do you cheer that? Do you say that at night? Is that your nightly prayer?
Oh man, as a soccer fan, when that chant starts, I just hate us. I hate us as a nation because it seems like the most boastful, we're better than you, like, ugh. There was one word I held back right there, so it's good to know after Tom Hanks' trash cocktail that I'm still got the filter going. But
all right, now that we got you all angry and fired up, you got to send us out in the spirit.
Yeah, get ready,
boy. Hold on, folks.
Get ready. No, your going out spirit is keep trying. Like, don't quit. Don't decide that you can just lie in the mediocrity or centerness or whatever it is that you've decided that, like, I've attained a level of where I want to be and I don't need to try any harder, because when you stop trying, you stop mattering. And so, so keep trying. Just keep trying to improve. Especially you, baby boomers. If you're older, stop coasting.
We'll talk about the sins of generations in another podcast.
Because the rest of us who are younger are still aspiring to be something better, and you old people think that you're just like, coast till waiting on death.
Yeah.
Stop waiting on death. Be better. Everybody, stop waiting on death no matter what generation you are. Be better. I'm not done. No, you can play me out. I don't care. I got a lot of opinions about you generations. Let's talk about Gen Z. Let's talk about the millennials. You Gen Xers.
Wow.
Freaking Gen Xers.
I think the Tom Hanks cocaine drink had an effect on you.
Guys, champagne
made you angry. Champagne makes Ben angry.
I'm not ready to break a glass.
If this fired you up, or if it soothed you, either way in the yin yang,
stop listening.
Share it with a friend. Share it with an enemy. Share it with somebody who needs to clean up their act. Will that work for him?
That felt like me. That was aimed at me.
Ben, I'm going to have you go back and listen to this one.
Bye.
See you later.